Okay, hi everybody. My name is Lisa Ox. I am the TribeWorks Administrator at TJE. Many of you know at TJE, the Jewish entrepreneur. We are constantly empowering the next generation of Jewish entrepreneurs, where we provide mentoring services to help startups, businesses that are in progress to really grow their business. So today we have the pleasure of hearing from Tzivia. Tzivia is the founder of 14 Minds, a boutique agency that specializes in developing marketing campaigns for nonprofit organizations. So the webinar today is called Marketing for Change, and she's going to discuss how small investments in marketing can generate major growth for your nonprofit. So I'm going to hand it over to Tzivia now.
Thank you so much, Eliza.
My pleasure. Go on.
Thank you, everyone who's here. I recognize a few names.
Okay, you should be able to share now.
Okay, great. So before I start, if whoever is here can maybe pop into the chat a little bit about themselves, like what their role is in the nonprofit space. Are you a nonprofit founder, employee, volunteer, board member, whatever your affiliation is to the nonprofit world, that would be really helpful for me to know who I'm speaking to. And the only other thing I want to say before I get started is that I'm going to try to save a nice amount of time for questions, because I think that's a lot more enjoyable for everybody than slides. So I'm going to get through the slides as quickly as possible and then talk at the end. But if you have questions in the meantime, feel free to pop them into the chat box and I'll address them then. Okay, thanks so much. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Okay, so like Eliza said, this is called Marketing for Change, how small investments in marketing can generate major growth for your nonprofit. So before we get into it, a little bit about me. I started a marketing agency called 14 Minds about 6-7 years ago. I have an MBA in marketing and a background before that in graphic design. I started off like most marketing agencies do, as a full service marketing agency, and then eventually niched down. And by beginning of 2020, we were providing marketing campaigns and strategies for a mixture of service businesses and nonprofits. And just by nature of the work we were doing, that's how it happened. And then, as we all know, COVID hit, and within a very short amount of time, all the service businesses had completely shut down. And I turned around and all of a sudden, all of our clients were nonprofits, and they were the ones that during Corona were needed much more than ever. And because of that, they needed us more than ever. And at that point, I made the conscious decision of, I love this niche, I love the work that we're doing, and I went all in. And now we exclusively work with nonprofits. And I really, once I made that decision, I went all in, spent a lot of time reading, doing research, getting to know the nonprofit world and the issues and the challenges and the opportunities that they were facing. And I noticed a kind of recurring pattern of some of the challenges that clients were coming to me with. And they were along the lines of, no one really knows what our organization does, or people think our organization does X, but really we do Y, and that organization does Y, and they think we're the same. Things, all the things along the lines where it really came down to a lack of marketing and a lack of communication. So I sat down and I said, what can I really do about this? I can only work with about a dozen clients at a time at this point, and there are so many more that have this challenge. So I decided to create what I call a marketing framework, and that's what I want to share with you today. And I'm excited about it because I've been working on it a while and I haven't really shared it much publicly yet. So we'll dive into that. But before we do, I just want to kind of explain what I feel is the challenges that marketing brings for nonprofits specifically. 4 primary challenges. Number one, there's kind of a stigma when it comes to marketing. It's thought of as overhead. And anyone in the nonprofit space knows that overhead is bad. We want to avoid overhead. Donors want to see low overhead. So if marketing is considered overhead, then it's not something that you're going to do too much of. And that's a pretty big issue. I think that plenty of organizations have tried to invest in marketing and have gotten pushbacks from donors or board members saying, why are you spending so much money? So that's number one. Number 2 is limited resources. Almost every nonprofit I know is kind of operating on a scarcity model where it's we fundraise, we spend it, we fundraise, we spend it. And every person in the organization is wearing, at least 5-6 hats. So if marketing is a little bit of a luxury, then no one's really doing it. Multiple audiences, that's another big one. Businesses sell to their customers. And yes, their customers can be different demographics, but they're the same person. Very often nonprofits are selling to different people than they're servicing. So their clients or their recipients are one audience, and then the funders are another audience, and that can make marketing extremely difficult. So a lot of nonprofits kind of generalize their marketing, which makes it not very effective. And the last thing is many nonprofits are fundraising focused, and it's not their fault. Going back to the stigma, right? We don't want to market just for the sake of marketing because that's an overhead expense. We want to fundraise so people know that we're raising money so we can help people. Kind of gets you into this chicken and egg situation where you're never really doing effective marketing. And I've seen this come up so often where organizations pop out of the woodwork once a year with this big fundraising event, and they really go all out and they make a huge splash and people donate. And at the end of that event, like nobody even really knows what the organization does. And I've heard this from like big founders of major organizations. They say we raised $1 million, but the people who we're trying to reach don't actually know that we can help them. So it kind of leads to this like confusion and a lot of missed opportunities, which I want to talk about. I just have to put this cartoon out there, which I love this cartoon. If Apple had to run like a nonprofit and justify the expenses, obviously we know that would never happen, but that's kind of the situation that nonprofits find themselves in, of having to justify things. And that's obviously not something I can do much about. I highly recommend, if you haven't read Dan Pilota's books, Uncharitable and Charity Case, he kind of talks about how nonprofits can try to address some of the larger issues with stigma around marketing and overhead. I highly recommend that, but that's outside of the scope of today. Today, I want to talk to you about the framework that I created, which is designed to really make marketing understandable, accessible, and integrated with a lot of the operations that you are already doing and that you're already thinking about, but framing it in a way that really helps you with marketing and some of the challenges that not doing marketing will bring. So before I get into each phase, I want to show you what each phase is designed to do. So it's plan, educate, connect, ask, and nurture, which just for the fun of it is short for, the acronym is PCAN. So I call it the PCAN framework. Doesn't have anything to do with anything, but it's an easy way to remember. So the plan phase takes you from, we don't have a clear idea of who we are and where we're headed, to crystal clarity on our vision, what steps we're taking long and short term to achieve it. The educate phase, which is phase 2, takes you from, we offer so many amazing services, but most people don't know what we do, to we're the first call when somebody in a community needs help and everyone knows it. And the connect phase will take you from, we don't have meaningful relationships with anyone in our audience, to our circle of supporters constantly growing. I'm hoping when I say the 2 part of it, you're thinking like, wow, that sounds like something I would love to have. The 4th phase, the ask phase, will take you from one fundraiser is doing all of the work to solicit donations, and each donation takes lots of effort. So we can count on all of our supporters to step up and help us financially or in other ways. All we have to do is ask them. And the last phase, the nurture phase, takes you from, we get one-time donations, but we never hear from them again, to our donors are like our family and we can rely on them to be ambassadors for our cause. Okay, so that being said, let's dive right in. I'm going to try, there's a lot of information here, but I'm going to try to cover it fairly quickly, and then we can get to specific questions. I'm also, for anyone who's interested, finishing up an ebook that goes into each one of these steps very specifically. So you can definitely drop your email address in the chat and I'll send it to you when it's completed. Okay, so phase 1 is the planning phase. Before you dive into actively marketing your organization, it's really important that you have clarity about who you are and where you're headed. I find that a lot of nonprofits kind of were founded almost by accident, where the nonprofit founder, when they were describing it, can't even believe it themselves. Like, you know, there was a need and I decided to help. And then all of a sudden overnight, we turned into this big organization. I can't even believe it. So when that happens, a lot of times no one actually took the time to say, oh, wow, like this took on a life of its own. Who are we? Where are we going? What's the plan here? So planning has to be done in different buckets of time, depending on what you're talking about. So every 5 to 10 years, I recommend doing a brand audit. If you're a newer organization, or if you've never done anything like this, the time to do this brand audit is right after this webinar is over. And the type of things you want to cover in a brand audit are super quickly, because this could be a whole webinar in and of itself, but you want to talk about your mission and your vision. Are they crystal clear, and does everyone involved in the organization know and can repeat it? You want to have your visual brand super professional, a logo, fonts and colors, consistent, clear, your tagline, your positioning, all of that goes into branding. And once in a decade, at least, you should be evaluating and make sure that it still represents who you are. Your brand, I know people think of like, oh, branding is for Nike and Apple, but no, really your brand is just the way people think of you. And if you're not actively doing anything about it, it's being shaped by forces beyond your control. And that's usually not a good thing. And it also usually leads to a lack of clarity, which is kind of how I started off in saying that this is a big issue. So before you go any further, that extreme clarity and then putting that clarity forth in a brand strategy is very important. Then once about every 12 to 18 months, you want to make sure you have a clear goal and objective. I think 12 months is a good amount of time because then you're starting off your calendar year very clearly. But if they're bigger goals, then they might need to kind of extend a little bit longer. And your goal should be something that is tied clearly to your mission, where it's this goal is a step towards reaching our mission. So the goals are something that you can't, if there's a marketing department or a person in charge of marketing, they cannot plan these in a vacuum. This is inter-organizational planning we're talking about, where the marketing goals and the organizational goals should be very clearly connected, if not the same. Every 3 to 6 months, you want to plan out and revisit your strategy. And that's the strategy is going to be how you reach your goals and objectives. And that is something we'll discuss in the next slide. And just the month on a monthly level, you want to revisit your tactics. And those are the specific things you're going to be doing to achieve your strategy. So because this could be a little bit vague and I didn't have the time to go into each, so specifically, I just wrote up a quick example, fictional organization that services hearing impaired people. So our mission is to provide support for the deaf community by equipping them with tools to function in the world. Our vision is of a world where hearing impaired individuals have all the same opportunities as everyone else. Our goal for 2022 is to launch a course for the hearing impaired. Our objective is to have 100 students enrolled in our new course by December 2022. And our strategy is to target college campuses. Some tactics we will use our social media targeting, working with influencers, and creating videos. So by the end of me describing this stage, you should be able to write up a paragraph like this for yourself. I don't mean to oversimplify it. If you don't have so much clarity, it may take a little bit more time, but you should ultimately have a paragraph like this for yourself that is hanging all over your office or shared with all of your team members, and it will give you very good clarity on what you're working towards. So how do you go and develop that strategy? Because there's a lot included in that. It's not necessarily a simple thing, but I broke it down into 3 steps that will hopefully make it as simple as possible. So step 1, you want to do some research and discovery. Research doesn't sound like a fun thing that anybody wants to do, but you can do this on a really low key basis. Primary is like just talking to people within your organization or related. And that could even be a phone call, call someone up, call up a board member, call up a recipient of your services and just kind of talk to them. How do they feel about your services? What would they like to see? And if you want to do it on a little bit larger scale, surveys, focus groups, interviews, those are all really great ways to get some primary research. Secondary research is research that already exists. So governmental resources, white papers, any kind of data. The Pew report that comes out every couple of years has some great research. So the key would be just to find some things that might be relevant towards helping you. And then you want to do a bit of competitive research. Especially because, like I mentioned, there's a lot of confusion sometimes between what different organizations are offering. So it's very clear to know who your competitors are, what they're doing, so you can be very clear on how to avoid those confusions and potentially work together with them if that's something that's relevant, and perform a marketing audit, which is kind of taking a look back at all of the marketing that you've done in the past, what worked, what didn't work, before you start planning anything new. Then once you have all that information, you can start working on your actual strategy. Again, a little bit outside of the scope of this conversation to go into, what can be included, but some of the things that you want to cover are your audience, who you're speaking to, what the messaging is going to be, and what channels you're going to be using to reach them. So in the example I gave in the previous slide, my audience is college students. I'm going to target them with a message saying that we have this course for you, and I'm going to reach them, let's say, via social media. And then the last step of creating this strategy is how do we make sure that this is going to be a successful initiative? And this is really, really important because you want to hold yourself to some kind of standard before you start investing your time and resources. So 4 aspects that will help you set you up for success. Budget. Do you have a marketing budget to associate to this project? And I really recommend doing your budget around the same time as you set up your goals, which is about 12 months. And if that's not feasible, then do it when you do your strategy about every 6 months, which will allow you to set up your strategy in your budget in conjunction with all the other things that are going on in your organization, and to do it from an investment standpoint and not from a retroactive standpoint. What I mean by that is not spending money based on where you were, but based on where you want to be. And just at a minimum, if you're curious, 5% of your operating budget should be going to marketing at a very minimum. So if you're not there yet, that's something to start working towards. Metrics and tracking. So in the example above, my goal was to have 100 students signed up. So how am I tracking that? Am I using a platform that they can sign up for? How can I go back and check if we're on the way towards achieving this? And this is a big one, responsibilities. Like I said, everyone's wearing a ton of hats. Who's going to be doing what? Figure that out before you start. This piece is your responsibility. This piece we're going to outsource, and make sure that's very, very clear before you start. So that's phase one, plan. We have a plan, amazing, we have clarity. Now what? Phase two is the educate phase. This is, I think, the most important phase because this is the phase that allows you to make an impact on the world, which is what, as a nonprofit founder or leader or employee, whatever you are, I think this is what you want, right? You don't go to sleep at night thinking, how am I going to raise the most money? You want to make an impact. And yet I'll find a lot of organizations skip this. And I suspect one of the big reasons a lot of organizations do skip this beyond the other challenges that I mentioned is because something I've heard a lot is we don't advertise because we can't handle the influx of calls that we're going to get if we do that. We're already at capacity. If more people know about it, then more people are going to call us and we're already, we can handle that. And I hear it, it's a very valid concern, but at the same time, you're not working in a nonprofit space so you can help some people or 2% of people. You want to help all the people. So, if there's someone out there who desperately needs your help and you're in essence hiding from them, that's a really big shame. And we don't want that at all. So this is the phase where you can really go out there, not only educate people about who you are and what you do, but inspire advocacy and start to really shift the needle for whatever your mission is. So how do we do this? What's the best way? Content and marketing. If this is a term you're not familiar with, I posted this in the italics, is a definition, which I won't read, you can skim that, but this is your opportunity to position your organization as an authority, which is really important. It's something you want to do. You want people to be able to trust you and to believe that you're not just saying it, you really are going to be able to help them, and then attract leads. So around this, we want to distribute resources on our subject matter. I'll give you some examples in the next slide. You want to incorporate lots of stories to prove that it's not just about what we say, we're actually helping people transform. And on just a quick thing on stories, because stories are going to be relevant to every single phase that we discuss, I highly recommend having some kind of internal story bank that you can easily share stories among you, volunteers, recipients, any story that comes up, put them in a story bank. That could be a Google Drive folder or whatever method works for you. Save it along with pictures, label it by type, and then you can consistently be sharing it. And then use your website as a hub of stories as well. Just in case you didn't realize that your website is not a one and done type of thing where you get someone to throw it up and don't touch it for 5 years. It should be something with rotating content. Every time somebody visits it, they should see new and fresh information. And you really want to use this opportunity to build up your list. So we're connecting right into the next phase, and we need to kind of capture people. So if you've been in the business world, you've probably heard the concept of a sales funnel, where we want to capture leads and then filter them out and leave only the very warm and hot leads at the bottom. So in the nonprofit space, we're not really doing that. We're not trying to weed people out. We're actually trying to widen. It's kind of like a circle instead of a funnel. We want to keep widening that circle. So we want to attract as many people to our core, which is our list. And we'll talk about that more in a minute. And then that's your first line. The basic thing you should be doing is having people on your email list. And then ultimately you do want to have, if you don't have yet, a donor management software, which as we go through the phases, you'll build them out from just an email to a full donor profile. And that will give you lots of information about them and lots of insights, which you can use. So what type of content can you be doing? So there's different types and then different formats. So types could be like a guide, a tutorial, an interview, a resource list, Q&A, case studies, quotes. These are all great examples of content types that you can be putting out, and they can be put out in different formats: videos, webinars like the one you're on right now, photos, blog posts, newsletters, ebooks, podcasts, all great types of content formats. And the picture here is something that we did for a client, where we created an ebook on the cost of wedding expenses, and people had to enter their email addresses to download it. So that's a great example of what's called email gated content. Once you have your content, you need to distribute it. So there's something called the PESO model, the PESO model, where there's paid, earned, owned, and shared media. So the way I recommend going about it, because this is a pretty overwhelming list, is from your owned media, which is the channels that are yours, pick 3 to start. And I would recommend that your website and your email list be your first 2. And then your third could be something where you think your audience is on. So let's say if you have a very big audience on Instagram, that could be your third, and start distributing your content there and build up an audience there. Once you get the hang of it, you can start adding more channels and repurposing content on different channels. But if you don't have resources, you're going to get stretched very thin if you try to do more than that. And then with the paid, earned, and shared models, I recommend using them on a campaign basis. So if you're running a very specific initiative or campaign, tying your investments in those channels directly into that project will make sure you'll have better results. And then keep using your earned to share content on a regular basis, and then you'll have much better results. Okay, great. So leading into phase 3 Connect, I'm excited we're moving along here. You built an audience. Now is your opportunity to inspire, to involve, to develop relationships without asking for large donations. This is the big caveat. So many nonprofits skip straight to give us money. Hi, we're here, give us money. Here's a beautiful story, beautiful video, give us money. We're taking a complete step back where we're saying we're not doing that. And there's actual psychology behind this phase. So this is not just like a warm and fuzzy, oh, we want relationships with people, which sounds really nice, but like is not going to do anything. There's real psychological research and studies that have been done. So I just put in one example here, but there's lots more that I can direct you to or more resources. But for example, there's something called the time ask effect, where studies prove that subjects who were first asked to give their time to a nonprofit ultimately donated more than subjects who just were asked to make a financial donation. And the reasoning behind this is there's something called the Cialdini's 6 principles of persuasion, and it's about how to get people to do things that you want to do, which sounds shady, but no, this is just using psychology. So don't worry about that. And you can read up about them. But one of his principles is the principle of consistency, which is people need to be seen as consistent. And once they commit to something, they're more likely to want to deliver on that commitment. So by asking them to give something that's not money first, and then following up with an ask for money, which we will do, don't worry, they're just more likely to continue. And I highly recommend you read the full 6 principles of persuasion. You can Google them. They're really fascinating, and they have a lot of nonprofit applications. So what are some ways and suggestions to connect? They can be low key, and they can be more, bigger initiatives such as community events, like fairs and shows where you're giving people an opportunity to come and interact with maybe your staff, your volunteers, or even your recipients, and just get to know them and have that human interaction. They can be volunteer opportunities. I think we know organizations that do this really well. You can, like, for example, organizations that sign volunteers up to visit hospitals or to drive patients to the hospital, things like that, or more admin back-end type of things. Let's say packing boxes for Tomkei Shabbos. That's another great example. And the organizations do well. They don't make it feel like admin work. They make it feel like an experience, and they really make a thing out of it. And it can be a really great way to make connections with your organization. And then micro giving. So I just want to be clear, when I said that you can't ask for money, I'm talking about significant donations. But in this phase, we can definitely ask for small amounts of money. And the way that can work is if it's very specific and will appeal towards emotions. So for example, $5 will buy a pair of shoes for this child, or round up for charity when you're checking out at the supermarket. These are great examples. Crowdfunding campaigns can work here on the small donation side of things, not the peer-to-peer side of things. I'll talk about that in a minute. So just, my friend is raising money for charity and I give $36. If done correctly, that can be my first into an organization, and then the organization can then nurture me to become an actual donor. But this is like on the smaller level. So now that we connected and we developed meaningful relationship with our audience, we can ask them for money, which I think that's the big thing on everyone's mind. We need to fundraise. But you're doing this anyway, but what we just discussed will make the job a lot easier. So I want to clarify the relationship between marketing and fundraising, because I don't think that many organizations treat them as discrete functions, but they are. 2 different things. There's marketing and there's fundraising, and they work together. Marketing should support fundraising because it's really important. Marketing and fundraising departments should exchange insights between each other and make sure that they're planning all of their initiatives strategically, considering the budget, considering the timing. I find a lot of organizations have different things happening at once. Where one department is planning a Chinese auction, the other is working on a building campaign, the other is doing an enrollment, and they're not planning it together. So the people on the receiving end are getting, let's say, 3 different communications from the same nonprofit, and none of them are connected. And they could have saved a lot of time and money, and just there could have been a lot more clarity if they would have been planned together. So it's important that they work together, but they are different departments. In a bigger organization, definitely. In a smaller organization, it might just be the way you approach them. But fundraising professionals are like the sales team of nonprofits. So in business, you have the marketing team, which brings in leads. You have the sales team that closes the deal. So in this case, you have fundraising professionals who are the ones that close the deal. So if you're an organization that is not large enough to have a development department or whatever, you should at the very least have a consultant or a coach that's walking you through the more one-on-one aspects of the relationship aspect, especially because there's so much more to fundraising than this type of donations. There's grants and all kinds of money that's out there for people who know how to get them. So hopefully you do have a fundraising strategy that's in place, and that makes your organization just much more solid all around. So there's two different types of asks. Like I just mentioned, there's mass fundraising, and then there's the one-on-one, which is the domain of the professional fundraisers. So the mass fundraising, again, this is something that organizations are pretty good at, throwing dinners and galas. In the last couple of years, we pivoted to a lot of virtual events, bigger, larger capital campaigns, and then the online side of things. In this phase, we're talking about larger donations and peer-to-peer campaign, where in this phase, we're asking for ambassadors, not just small donations, because that we can do in the connect phase. And then the one-on-one, which is like directed donations and planned giving and individual solicitations. This is the realm of the professional fundraisers, but they can definitely be supported by the marketing department to make those much stronger. Now, our last phase is the nurture phase. So a proper thank you is not like a one-time, like, here's your gift for, thanks so much for your donation. It's a ongoing process that is something that should be part of your operations. And this is where you turn a one-time donor into a passionate ambassador for your cause, someone who will not only support you financially, but will step up and fundraise on your behalf. So why do donors give again? This is important to understand the factors that go into what will make a donor give again. So number one, they perceive your organization to be effective. They know what to expect when they interact with you. They are thanked in a timely manner. They have opportunities to share feedback with you, and it's a two-way conversation. And importantly, they feel appreciated. They feel like, their donation or whatever it is that they gave, whether even this could be, when we say donor, it could be someone who donated time as well, or something, a material. It doesn't have to just be money. So practically, how do you apply this? So number one, I think that every organization should have thank you protocols and divide it into tiers. It's important to divide it into tiers because for every organization, you might have different levels that are considered large. So for an organization that's kind of small and new, a $500 donation might be large, whereas a large organization, it might be upwards of $5,000, $10,000. Those are considered large donations. So you should have protocols in place for how do we thank donors in each bucket. So the small donors might get an immediate email. The larger donations might get a personal phone call or a gift with a visit. And those should be something that you have in place and you have templates for. Like, this is our email template, this is our direct mail template, and that way it should just not be too much effort on your part to immediately thank donors. It's really important for the thank you to come quickly and to be specific. So as specific as you can, and I put this example here that I screenshot a while back from, I don't even know what this is, the Sundara Fund, where they ask these influencers to share their cause and to donate, for their followers to donate $5. And they were really specific. I don't know if you can see, it might be too far, but it just, I'll read it out to you. I just wanted to show you, we've already been able to distribute 8 packages to housebound individuals in Bangalore, thanks to your house. Thank you for your support and encouragement, and you and your followers are so generous. So imagine somebody who gave that $5 now sees this incredible impact. If this organization reaches out again, they are so much more likely to give again, because it's very clear that their $5 did something meaningful. So that's really important. And I thought this was a great example. Also asking for feedback as much as possible. That can be surveys or on a one-on-one basis. Empowering supporters to become ambassadors. You might assume that donors don't want to do very much. And I think in the past, and I'm talking about maybe a generation before this was true, where donors kind of just, I'll write you a check, leave me alone. Today's generation, it's the millennials who really are controlling most of the money now. They don't want to just write a check. They want to be involved. And if you don't believe me, just look around at all the people who are running marathons, biking for charity, hosting barbecues. People are really willing to step up. So don't make assumptions that they don't want to do more. Give them the opportunity to. Also personalized interaction. So like, think about like how many times, like I remember getting a wine decanter with the logo of the organization. Like, no thanks. When am I ever going to bring that to my table? But if you have a donor who, let's say, because you have a great relationship, they love golf, and you give them like a personalized golf set or something like that, or they love baseball and you get them seasons tickets. These type of personalized thank yous go a very long way. So those are the 5 phases. How do we put it all together? So the thing is that these are not like one-time tasks. You don't just plan, educate, these are things that you have to do on a consistent basis. So I recommend that you make a calendar. And if this is a monthly calendar, it could be done weekly, quarterly, whichever you think will work best for your organization, given your capacity and your resources, where basically you're dedicating specific times to each phase. And that will make sure you hit all the phases. So you can just look, these are just some samples of things that you can do in each phase, and they're divided up by channel. And you can just review that. And if you notice, planning is not on this, because planning is something that has to be done separately. You should dedicate your time to revisit. So the buckets that we said, 5 to 10 years, 3 to 6 months, those should be something that you have on your calendar, your planning days. That should be something that you make sure to hit. So I want to go back now and quickly show you, kind of before we wrap this up, the beauty of this framework and why it's kind of special and maybe not like other marketing processes or frameworks that you've seen before. So if you look along the bottom, I have these lines where it says fundraising, audience, supporters, volunteers, and donors. So this is what happens when you go through each phase, right? So look at the bottom here. So when you go from the educate phase, you take your audience, which is just a bunch of random people that you're giving information to, and through the connect phase, you're converting them to your supporters, right? Through the ask phase, you're converting those supporters to volunteers and donors. And then in the nurture phase, you're converting them to ambassadors, right? All well and good. Now, what's kind of amazing is that at the same time, without much more work that we're asking of you, you're actually expanding your impact. So now go to the top. We are in the educate phase. Okay, we have that same audience, a bunch of people. Now in that audience, a lot of people that need your help and didn't know that you could possibly help them. They have been suffering in silence or in a school that is not the right fit for them because they didn't know. And then you went out and you educated them. And now you're no longer afraid to do so. You're no longer afraid of being overwhelmed by capacity, because remember, you have all these ambassadors who are willing to fundraise for you so you can grow and scale. So you just converted all those people in your audience to recipients, right? So now you have more people that you help. So you're achieving your mission and you have what to show for it. You can show, wow, look at the impact that we made on the world. Now there's one more step here in the ask phase that will be kind of an additional step if you really want to think about it, which is now think about the alumni. Okay, I'm going to call them alumni, meaning the people who went through your organization and you helped them and maybe now are, thank God, on the other side of things or graduated or however your program works. These people can be your biggest advocates. Now, I don't deny that there are some organizations that help with very private personal matters, and this is not going to work for them. But for a lot of organizations, especially now, stigma is being slowly removed from a lot of more sensitive topics. Many of these people will become your biggest advocates. So if you nurture those relationships and you treat alumni similar to the way you treat your donors, then they can also become ambassadors for your cause. And ambassadors coming from both ends of this framework will give you a fundraising army. And your fundraising army is the true way to scale, because even a large organization that can afford to bring on a lot of fundraisers, it's very hard to scale because there's a lot of relationships involved. So you have all of these people fundraising on your behalf. I mean, we've all been hit up by people who are fundraising. You give to them because it's important cause to them. I mean, somebody called me who I hadn't seen in 10 years and explained to me that she had this organization that really helped her. Can I give her? And I gave her money because I was moved. I hadn't seen her in 10 years, but I was moved. And this is how it's just a great way to scale some of your fundraising efforts. And I want to give one example before I wrap this up, which is there was an organization that we were working with during Corona that really stepped up for their community. They were providing tons of resources that were helping people get through the pandemic over the course of the year. They were completely free. And at the end of the year, and they were doing great communications. They were putting out webinars and really, really doing so much. At the end of the year, they threw up a fundraising campaign. All they did was create a video. They really didn't do much marketing, and they raised $700,000 from their community that was just so grateful for the work they were doing. And this is the goal, because so many times there are clients that come to me very close to their fundraising campaign, and we have to unfortunately spend so much money on media because no one knows who they are and what they're doing. So we have to kind of pay for that attention. And even then, many of them can't raise close to that kind of money. So this really proves that by going through this process and being intentional at every step, your efforts can just be so much more powerful. So that was the framework I went through really quickly. I'm going to stop my sharing and kind of take a quick look in the chat box, see if there's any questions. If anybody wants to come on and unmute themselves and ask a question, then I'll be really happy to take that. Just a question here. The name of the author up front is Dan Pallotta. He gave a very, very famous TED Talk in 2013 called The Way We Think About Charity is Dead Wrong. And I basically built my entire business model off of some of the things he brings up. So I definitely recommend that you listen to that. Okay, does anybody want to ask a question in person or dump it in the chat box? I'd really love to maybe address some of the things that we started discussing. It's Pallotta, here we go. I just put it in the chat. And Pallotta. Do you audit community organizations as a whole? I'm not really sure I understand the question, sorry. If you want to come on and ask it. Anybody else have a question? Yes, go ahead and unmute yourself. Israel Goldfish.
Yeah, so you mentioned in the beginning that the like model of viewing marketing as overhead is detrimental to the organization because it makes it seem like a chore and because it's expensive and people want to lessen overhead. So is there a way in which kind of marketing can be used as an opportunity to like crystallize your brand identity? And like, I understand that this is kind of your whole talk, but like, can you just say like succinctly, what is the proper way to view branding and marketing that will kind of not be considered overhead?
For sure, for sure. So the purpose of marketing, you can think of it as a delivery system. Whereas you have something that you want to share to the world, you have a way that you can help the world, but you need to get it to them. So marketing, we think of marketing as promotion generally, but actually if you take like a marketing one-on-one course, there's the 4 Ps, right? Promotion, place, price. It's all the factors that go into getting something in the business world, getting something from the manufacturer into the customer's hand. There's a lot of factors. So in the nonprofit world, just because we don't exist to make profit for our stakeholders, which is really at the end of the day, what differentiates nonprofits from for-profit businesses, we still have something that we want to deliver. And it may be some cases more intangible, but we still have to go through that process of getting it into the hands of the end users. So if you're taking away our delivery system, you're in essence saying to me, and you can use this as an argument, in essence saying that you have to be the world's best secret, but you also have to help everybody. So you're tying my hand. It's not really feasible. You would never ask a business owner to do that. So don't ask a nonprofit to do that. And branding is along the same lines. Branding is that packaging, is the way people think of you, and it creates clarity. So again, if you're going to be cheap on branding, then you're going to be cheap on your end result. So it just logically actually doesn't make any sense.
So instead of kind of thinking of it as overhead, you're trying to inspire the nonprofit to think of it as sort of a necessary like conduit for their services.
Yeah, it's part of operations, exactly. So like if you that TED Talk, you should really read it. Really goes into what you're asking nonprofit leaders, and he kind of I'll quickly share because it's entertaining, where he basically says the nonprofit, right? It's scarce, and not only do we not want you to spend on marketing, we don't want you to spend on salaries either, right? And it's all over the news if it's found out that this nonprofit leader made $1 million this year. So he's basically saying, so you're telling me that it makes a lot more sense for me to quit working for the nonprofit, go work in the corporate world. I'll make $1 million selling violent video games to minors, and then I'll get on the board of this charity, and I'll tell all you nonprofit, you suckers who are still working for the nonprofit, I'll tell you what to do. That's what he's saying, right? The logic is not there. Everyone should be able to do good for the world, but do good for themselves at the same time, and it all goes hand in hand together.
Thanks.
Pleasure. Anybody else? Okay, I guess if there's no other questions, we'll wrap it up, but I'll put my email address here. If anybody has any specific questions, I'm going to copy all of these emails to send you my ebook. That's almost done. I'm really excited about it. And that's it. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much, Tzivia. This was really fantastic. I think we really all enjoyed. Azriel, did you have a last question?
I guess, yeah. I mean, I'm curious about crowdfunding, like Kickstarter or charity. I'm curious if like which one of the models of like the 5 steps in terms of like kind of marketing, like you have a video that is about that campaign, but like I think that's just a particular type of fundraising that I have experience with and I'm curious about.
So they definitely have a place as long as they're not the default, which unfortunately I feel like in a lot of organizations, those crowdfunding campaigns replace any form of marketing. And they kind of hope like in a span of, our 36-hour campaign will bombard you with videos and we'll get you to donate. So it doesn't really work very well. You can get maybe some impulse donations, but if you bother people enough, but you haven't converted anybody to a supporter. It's just like, please leave me alone. And so phase-wise, there was the connect phase where we can ask people for small amounts of money. And then in the ask phase, that also can work really well, but you have to have done the work beforehand to have an audience. So like in the example I gave, where this organization threw up a thing, they have an engaged, grateful audience that just we're waiting to be asked. So that works really well. But how many times have you gotten or seen an ad pop up on your screen from an organization that you've never heard of, and they're using like some horrible tragedy to try to compel you, and your reaction is like, no, That does not work. Leave me alone. Build genuine relationships with me. I'll be happy to give. Statistically, people want to give. You have to go about it the right way. Someone asked a question. Can you comment for a second on the mindset of donor? I think sometimes nonprofits are afraid to make the ask because they think 100%. So there are so many things that I think nonprofits are afraid to do because they think a lot of things. Not only in this particular world, but I was actually just talking to someone who does funding strategy for nonprofits, and she said that nonprofits are afraid to apply for grants because they assume that they're not going to get it. So I think nonprofits have to really switch their mindset, especially when it comes to donors, and they're not doing you a favor, right? At the end of the day, you're doing them a favor. They're someone who, going about their daily lives. You're the one that's out there changing the world, and you're giving them the opportunity to be a part of that. So if you're looking at it that way, you won't be afraid to ask them anything. And the best fundraisers I know are the ones who really walk around with that mindset of like, I'm giving you an opportunity to be part of something amazing. And we're not indebted to you. You're helping us make great impact. And that goes back to the whole idea of overhead, right? If you're an organization that's operating on a very small mindset and, then somebody, oh, why is your overhead so high? Then that it's a valid question. But if you're actually going out there and transforming, it doesn't have to be quantity, it could be quality. So, either hundreds and hundreds of people or 10 people at a very high level, and you say to them, what does the overhead matter? Look, I'm changing the world. What does it matter to you if I spend my $10 here? Does it matter to you if I upgraded our computer system so that in fact, it should matter to you because now we're operating more efficiently, but it changes the conversation from dollars and cents to impact. So that's what I like to say is just impact first. It's all about how many people you're helping, how you're helping them, and are you actually achieving your mission, or are you just scared to do anything because you don't want to spend any money? Where exactly do I advertise if I'm a non-for-profit? So that's a hard question, because what are you advertising, and should you even be advertising? If you're running a campaign where there's a very specific goal and advertising is justified, it does have a place. But if we're doing the phases right, then you will only need paid advertising on a very specific as needed basis. And you can really get away with doing none of it at all. Like, I think when people hear we're a marketing agency, they assume that means, oh, you're going to want me to spend thousands of dollars on media. No, you may need to never ever spend any dollars on media. It really depends on how consistent you're being and how much time you have. So if you wake up 3 weeks before you want to accomplish something, you're going to have to pay for media. If you're marketing now and over time growing this audience that's engaged, you may not need to ever spend any money on media. So that's a very specific question, and the real answer is to start thinking bigger picture, and don't take one immediate tactic at a time. Start thinking about your strategies and goals as a whole. Naftali, did you want to go live, or did I answer your question? I don't know if he's still here. Okay, I think that was it.
Yeah, no, sorry, yeah, I'm here. No, just a very, sorry, hello. It's always so many people ask me, where do I advertise? Facebook, WhatsApp, and I'm a WhatsApp person, but Facebook, WhatsApp, Instagram. Everybody asks me for not us the hardest, because for nonprofit, you're asking people usually donate. And when it comes to the point when you're paying money to advertise, usually people are asking for money, and just the hardest part is where to advertise. Like besides then, WhatsApp, Facebook, Instagram, it's a very hard topic. And then budgeting is also the hardest part. But what I'm really asking is demographics or age. Do you know which the people are on Facebook, people on Instagram?
That's a great question. And audience is not something I went into too deeply, but it's a very, very important question to really, really know your audience and its audiences, right? Because every nonprofit has multiple audiences. So there's something called audience personas, or sometimes they're called avatars, which is you basically create this fictional human to represent each of your audience. So you could have Danny Donor. Danny Donor is 45, he has 5 kids, and they go to this school, and these are his hobbies, and these are his fears. And when you do any kind of marketing and related to this demographic, you're literally marketing to Danny Donor. And it sounds silly, but it actually works really, really well, because is Danny Donor on WhatsApp, or is his demographic on Facebook, or on where is he? Does he read this paper? Once you get to know, and you might have to do a little bit of research to really be able to identify the specifics, but once you know that much about them, then you won't have any questions, because you're going to be marketing to them where they are and speaking to them into language that will resonate with them. So it's a great question that I didn't really get to touch on, but that's in and of itself is also a whole topic.
Yeah, I think that's a really hard question. I mean, to answer and just, in like 4 minutes, but so many people expect for marketing companies to know exactly, the pinpoint, Pinterest or like, Instagram, that like, it's just what happened in life. You just started 2 minutes ago, our conversation, but 100%. I think it's a hard thing. It's a topic that needs to be talked about more.
For sure. Yeah, it has to be understood better what you're actually trying to do before you throw money somewhere.
Right. Okay,
Azrael Gelfish, how can we stay in touch? If you're asking with me, I put my email address in, I'll put it again. You could also, I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on WhatsApp. Yeah, that's basically it. Okay, Lisa, I think that we are done. Thank you so much, everybody. This was great.
Okay. Thank you so much, Tzivia. If any of you want to reach Tzivia again, she's on LinkedIn. She put her email in the chat. Please feel free to reach out. We appreciate everyone joining, and thank you again. Have a great day, everybody.
Thank you.